The international break is finished, over, done for a month, and then it's back in November again. But Arsenal, of course, have been delighted by the 8 goal contributions of the players that have been involved across their respective nations. And that means that none of them can get injured. Not even that, but those, of course, still at the Emirates also can't get, or at least the Zubimendi training centre, can't get injured. Unless you're Ben White, then you can. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls on another episode of what is indeed our Arsenal News Show. I'm currently on the way to the Zubimendi training centre to check on Ben White to see if he's okay, ahead of Mikel Arteta's press conference. And of course, it sucks I can't be with you for a live show, but that does mean that we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by a guest for our pre-recorded episode. And I'm very happy to be joined today by Laura Kirk-Francis, or as I called her during my live show, Laura Francis Kirk. But less about that and more about you. How are you? Good, you well?
I'm very well, Tom. Thanks for having me. I actually, when I got married during the ceremony, the celebrant referred to me as Laura Francis Kirk, Laura Kirk-Francis, in totally different ways, multiple times. So whatever you feel like, I'm happy with.
Great. That's fine. I mean, which way do you prefer it, Kirk-Francis? Is that like a favoured family member? Is that how it works? Like...
Yeah, so my surname is Kirk, my husband's surname is Francis, and I've not changed it in any official capacity because I can't be bothered. But yeah, Kirk-Francis is the preferred way.
Lovely stuff. Beautiful. We'll call it that from now on, or at least if I remember, which is not a promise ever at all. But how have you enjoyed your international break? Has it been enthralling and joyous throughout?
They just keep coming, don't they? These international breaks, and as you said in the intro, we've got another one to look forward to. I love watching Arsenal players in the international break thrive, but I do watch with a kind of like a bit of a little bit of a squint, and I'm more looking for right, are they off yet? Get them off, get them home. That's it, because we are in such a strong position. The last thing we need is injuries, but it is good to see them scoring, playing well for their countries, for Arsenal. But it is annoying that we keep having to pause the Premier League for this. Yeah,
it's always one of those. Because now, and you might experience this now working more close to the industry, is that sometimes the international breaks almost feel like a little bit of a respite these days, because it's like game, press conference, like non-stop churn. And these international breaks do offer a little relief. But then you start realising, what am I going to write about? What am I going to produce content about? Now, for you, you're quite fortunate because there is a wealth of brilliant content out there that you can absolutely rip apart, as you do on a regular basis. And I have to commend you on the most recent TalkSport kind of comedy sketch, which we were just alluding to off air a little bit. How are you finding your jump into the world of influencer territory?
To be fair, the international break is absolutely rife for the type of content that I make, because people are scratching for things to do, to talk about. Yeah. I genuinely think at some point we all just need to agree that during the international break, everyone just shuts the F up for a bit and we all just be quiet about it, because there is still a tension that people need to be filled, but at the same time, if there's nothing happening, that's okay. We can all just say nothing. But that doesn't apply to 24-hour news stations, TalkSport, etc. We have to have something to talk about. So I agree, I actually quite enjoy an international break because it's a little bit of respite, get to maybe see some friends and family and do something on the Saturday that doesn't revolve around it. But as I said, for me, because people are just looking for clicks, engagement, it's too easy. It's like fishing in a barrel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it is horrendous, some of the stuff, because the encouragement to just create silly content, silly words, things that be clipped up is it's so rife. But yeah, it was a particularly good one today, which I retweeted to my timeline for people that want to go and give it a watch. But let's talk about the football, because Arsenal, of course, are returning to action, and it looks like they're going to do so without Ben White. We assume, at least I alluded to in the light-hearted intro of the show, of course, but he wasn't spotted by Sky cameras at the open training session for broadcast media on Thursday. I mean, I cannot help at the moment, whenever it comes to talking about Ben White and an injury, without, I imagine that in the live chat box that's going on right now, which I can't see because we're pre-recording this, of course, on Thursday afternoon, that someone will already be saying, shall we sell Ben White? And now, because that is just the way in which the kind of the world of the Arsenal fan works. So where's your head at with this yet another, seemingly, we assume at least, problem with Ben?
I think it's a real shame, and I think as well as people saying, yeah, we need to sell him, you'll see a lot of people with a real like emotional attachment to him. You know, he has been an absolute warrior for us and has been forced to play probably a lot more football than we would have wanted to, because obviously with Timber's injury back 2 seasons ago, you know, he has clearly played through an injury, and this could be the result of that. You know, we don't know. I think the let's sell him is a complete knee-jerk reaction, because we've done all this squad building to then revert to, okay, well, let's sell him. We're sort of undoing that. But at the same time, it's such a cliche, but availability is the best ability. And should Timber get injured, I think he's quite close to a suspension as well. Is he on 3?
Oh, he's on 2, so he has to avoid 3 in the next 12 games to avoid a 1 match. So 1 in every 4 is very feasible for a player like Timber. So yeah,
exactly. And at that point, you start going, well, okay, you know, we do have some options there, but I miss the Ben White from about 2 seasons ago when he was really clicking with Saka. Have we seen that recently? Sporadically. So I think until we know the kind of like prognosis of, is this another long-term injury? Is this a setback from something that he's already got? But I do think it's probably a symptom of having played more football than we would want him to. But I would be certainly hanging on to him for the moment. We're not at the Tomiyasu stage yet, which I've seen some comparisons. We're nowhere near yet.
Yeah, no, we're not near that. I mean, Tomiyasu played 9 minutes of last season and then got injured again, which is kind of startling. I don't even know really what's going on in the world of Tomiyasu at the moment. I think he was due to return from injury at the end of the year, or close to the end of the year. So I imagine obviously he's been released now, that he might try and find a new club in the January window to register for the second half of the season, if indeed he can prove his fitness. But back to White, like, I've written a piece of Sky out this morning, Football London, which is basically around the idea of kind of players that have suffered injuries and have left as a result of Arteta basically saying, and Tomiyasu is definitely an example, but more so I look at like Kieran Tierney, you know, a player who was really in our minds as this guy's going to be the left back for the next however long. And obviously injuries kind of stole his Arsenal career away from him, and then reinvested in Alexander Zinchenko, and of course more recently brought in other players as well to play that role. And I think Emile Smith-Rowe you can probably put in that category as well. You know, a player that was given the number 10 shirt, was playing a lot on the left, and then again injuries kind of stunted his ability to play regularly. Martinelli was establishing himself. Trossard was signed. Ødegaard was captain, and at that time, annoyingly now, you know, never injured then. And Smith-Rowe eventually was seen as just a player who was really quite surplus to requirements, and ultimately gained Arsenal a fair chunk of money when they sold him. And he's now getting more, I say more regular football. He's still fighting for more regular football at Fulham. So it's difficult to not be realistic about the chances that Ben White's future at Arsenal is. I wouldn't describe it as certain, you know, at this point, because we know how much Arteta relies upon having depth in every position. And if to rely on Timber, who himself has had 2 surgeries in the last 3 years, it's a lot to put on him. So yeah, frustration.
How old is Ben White?
27, I think.
Yeah, so in my mind, he's, you know, because I'm old.
28.
28. So he's sort of, he's coming into that kind of like later years, I guess you'd say, in his career. Although that sounds,
we say that as 2 30-plus-year-olds like fuming now. Yeah,
he's getting on a bit. He's getting a bit old. But you know, if you're the player and you're going, right, if my body can't handle the intensity that's required at this level, do I then make the active choice to go, right, I'm going to kind of make a decision on my own behalf, knowing my body and knowing the future, knowing the way that Arteta wants the squad to play, can I still keep up with that? But I think Ben White, although he's one of those characters that seems so nonchalant, but would, I imagine, just be absolutely gutted to be constantly missing out. And it's quite it's quite strange sort of tension of someone who seems so unbothered, but we know he's not. You know, we know he loves doing this. So it must be very difficult to be on the edge of probably the best squad that you will ever be a part of, but not being able to contribute. And I do wonder what that does to his mentality of going, right, do I hang on? Do I keep trying to come back? Or do I say, actually, I am past my best and my body can't give what it needs to for me to return? And that would also be a fair kind of assessment of it. But I just imagine how difficult he must find it.
Yeah, I think there was Mental Health Awareness Day the other day, and Ben White was included, I think, in that video that Arsenal put out on their feed, speaking, pretty frank and in a very un-Ben White, as we expect, kind of way, from him. And we know that, especially I think the Tomiyasu situation was very well documented, that there was, I think he did suffer from a mental health standpoint with the amount of injuries, the amount of absence he had from the game. He was far away from obviously his home, and from a Japanese culture to an English culture, the language is so different. And I don't really can speak English. Just that cultural difference and the disfamiliarity, I guess, can take its toll. But we know that injuries and players is never something to shy away from when talking about that mental load. So hopefully things will work out, and we'll hear from Mikel Arteta in his press conference, of course, a little bit later on this morning. In fact, some of you listening to this may have already heard what Arteta's got to say, and hopefully it's nothing serious. Hopefully it's not even an injury, but he did miss training. As did White and Zubimendi, it looked like as well, who kind of stood on the sidelines and watched alongside Andrea Berta. Sam Blitz from Sky Sports was posting some of the images. Now, I think that is more indicative, especially if he's there present, showing the media he's around. It's more of a load thing than anything else, and I wouldn't be too concerned. But again, we'll hear more from Arteta on that. The big blow of the break has been obviously Odegaard, and the knowledge that he's going to be out for until the next international break, basically, Laura. So how are you viewing Arsenal's ability to work without him for that extended period?
I think it's a real blow because of him playing himself back into some really, really good form. And I think it's stunting the momentum of kind of him returning to what we know he can be, which is obviously we didn't see as much as that last season. So it's a real kind of like double whammy of missing our captain, but also kind of putting a bit of a pin in what is a sort of linear recovery back to what he used to be. But I think Arsenal could not be in a better place to play without him. I think we've seen, it's a real shame that the Eze, Odegaard sort of, them on the pitch together, we only got about 20 minutes of it against West Ham.
Yeah.
Real shame. But is this a time for Waneri to kind of get the minutes that he is not really had for probably about 6-7 months? And I think as frustrating as it is, I think this team is probably much better placed than we have been previously to deal with that Odegaard. So you remember, I think it was last year, he was out for 6 or 7 weeks, missed the North London derby, came back from that ankle injury. And to be fair, I think we had a good run of fixtures there. But now I'm looking at the types of players that I know can also create, even likes of Zubimendi, Rice stepping into that sort of slightly more central role. No Odegaard, no problem-ish. I'd obviously prefer he was there, but I think we have more than enough to sort of carry that team through. I think surprised at how serious the injury was.
Me too.
But it looks like a kind of contact injury, and you think, okay, bit of bruising that needed kind of management, but for it to be it's a sort of ligament injury or something, isn't it? For that to happen seems very, very unlucky, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, all three of his injuries have been impact injuries this season. 2 shoulder injuries kind of landed awkwardly in the same place twice, and now this third one. They're all impact problems. So it's nothing to do with a historical situation with injuries, or we can now say he's made of glass, or the classic Jack Wilshere tribulations he used to get. Yeah. Exactly. He has just been so unfortunate with these impact problems, and fortunately, the ligament that he has injured, his MCL, is one of we did a whole thing on the show the other day where we kind of talked through with that. Any expertise at all, just as someone who suffered an ACL injury myself, the ACL is obviously the ligament that hasn't got blood flow, and so you have to have surgically repaired, whereas the MCL has blood flow and so obviously heals, and so that's the benefit of that being the ligament specifically that he has damaged, and that will heal over the next 5 to 6 weeks, and hopefully he'll be back after the break, because the first game back after the break is the North London derby. So he and maybe Noni Madueke as well. There's been some rumours about Kai Havertz maybe as well returning back sooner than expected, which would be a good sign. And the other player that is, as we know, definitely back now because he was involved in training on Thursday is Pierre Hincapié, who we have seen 6 minutes of, I think, against Athletic Club, and we've been kind of stolen away from seeing more of him. But with obviously Calafiori, your guy, of course, being on 3 yellow cards and 2 bookings away from a suspension, it's probably good that he's now Hincapié back and in the fold, and he's going to offer maybe Calafiori some minutes rest. Or you're against that idea? for obvious reasons.
Yeah. And I think given how Calafiori plays with that much energy, he covers so much of the pitch. Like, obviously, I don't watch him any more than any other player when I'm at the Emirates, but every now and then,
absolute liar.
But I genuinely think to myself, where's he gone? Right, where is he? Oh, hang on. He's in the he's on the right wing. Right, what are you doing over there? So that's what we want him to do. We want him to be free, but at the same time, that comes with a kind of 60, 70 minutes. Is he likely to be gassed? And then you can put someone like, presumably, Hincapié on. And I say that, having what you say, about 6 minutes of this player, but he obviously comes very well, kind of with a very good reputation. I wonder whether we might see a bit of him in the coming games, just as a kind of off the bench for 20, 30 minutes. And then depending on how that goes, etc. But I will hold my hands up and say I don't know anything about this player. I don't know I don't know what kind of style he plays, other than I think it's very good that we have backup for Calafiori beyond just Miles Lewis-Skelly, particularly when we need someone just to kind of slot in for 20 minutes.
Yeah, look, he's a player that Arsenal are willing to invest, it seems, £45 million in next summer, because there's, for all intents and purposes alone, that he's going to become permanent. And he's a player that, I'm surprised Arsenal managed to get, if I'm honest, because he is very highly rated. And by Leverkusen, he was very much appreciated. For Ecuador in particular, he's absolutely loved for his defensive work rate, his tenacity, how much he offers going forwards if he's to play left back, his versatility, because he can play at left centre half as well. And I think obviously we moved on Kivior, and there's an expectation as well that will become permanent next summer. And we've signed, in my opinion, an upgrade and a player that can not just play in place of Gabriel, but could offer Arsenal perhaps a more traditional style at left back, the Tierney-esque running up the touchline, providing crosses into the box. He does that when he plays in that role. So I'm curious to see how he gets on. And it's gutting that he's had these kind of opening couple of months ripped away from him with injury. And he had a groin surgery in the summer when he was still a Bayer Leverkusen player, which obviously he's still feeling the effects of now. And we hope now that the respite that he's had and the rest that he's had is going to give him the opportunity to form a foundation to play on more. And Arsenal go into this weekend, against a Fulham team that again stole points off us last season in this game. Painfully, Arsenal's last-minute winner was ruled out for the margin of offside that Martinelli was before he crossed the ball. But it's another game, of course, after the last two, where we've beaten West Ham and Newcastle, two teams that beat Arsenal in the same fixtures last season, as is the Crystal Palace game next week, another game we dropped points in the same fixture last season. It's if we can get a win in this game, Laura, I mean, you're looking at an Arsenal side that just completely looks night and day from the previous season's results.
Yeah, absolutely. And these, as you say, these are the games where last season we kind of slipped away from keeping any kind of pressure on Liverpool. So the draw at home to Fulham, the Crystal Palace game as well, where we sort of threw away the lead twice, although both excellent goals. Can't fault.
Aston Villa, we did that as well.
Yeah,
we
so
2-0 up. 2-0 we threw it away 2-2, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did. We were 2-0 up against Aston Villa and we threw it away. These are the games that kind of old version of me would fear, because you'd go, right, Fulham I think they've won or at least drawn at home. I don't think they're beaten at home yet.
Yeah,
might be wrong on that one, but I think their home record is very good, less so away. And obviously we will have a bit of kind of nervousness given that we've been beaten there not 2 seasons ago, I think it was, on New Year's Day.
Yeah, 2-1.
So not our kind of happiest of hunting ground, but I just look at this side and go, there's just no way this side gets beaten. I say this incredibly confidently, just because I think we have the momentum with us. I don't think you can underestimate the momentum these players will get from having performed well for their countries. They come back into the squad. The squad is feeling good because we are top of the league. There is, crisis at Liverpool. There's, crisis or whatever at Chelsea, Man United. So it's one of those things where you just want them to do a professional job. Like, just, do what is asked of you, do your role. And if you can do that, we take the 3 points, we go home, we go on to the next one. It's just asking for that kind of like consistency. I'm not expecting us to blow away teams, because Fulham, as I say, 13th or 14th, they're not just going to roll over. But we have have the personnel, and I think we have the mentality, not mentality, that's the wrong word, the ability that we didn't have last year to play ourselves into and out of a game where we are stuck. So, you know, different examples, but obviously Newcastle, I think the first half we were brilliant. West Ham, everyone sort of talked about how flat it was, but that's the kind of performance that I expect from these games. They're not going to be spectacular 5-0, 6-0 as much as we want. It might be a bit of a grind for some of it. 2-0, go home, 2-0, 1-0, etc. That's absolutely fine. And we just need to start this run of slightly nicer fixtures on paper on Saturday. And I think because we play before Liverpool and they've got Man United at home, it could put a huge amount of pressure on them should we come away with 3 points. But as I said, I think we have the team this year that we didn't have last year, with the right people and the right sort of problem-solving ability, which we didn't have last year. We would just do the same thing over and over again. Whereas this time, I think the players have learned, and Arteta has learned, that sometimes it needs to be changed.
Yeah, you rightly pointed out that Fulham are indeed unbeaten at home at the start of this season. They've played some tricky opponents, and they've still managed to come out with either wins or draws in all of them. And I think Arsenal was certainly the toughest test they'll face this season. But at the Emirates, at Craven Cottage, which is the nicest walk in football, of course, for anybody that does go, it's always known as that. And for those that are going to be enjoying the boat ride, I think the Red Action are putting on once again, do enjoy, because it is one of the best trips you can do, I think, in the Premier League if you are a fellow London club supporter, because it's just so easy to do as well. But look, I think that this is, and you mentioned it there, the idea that Arsenal are going to just blow teams away 5 and 6-0, that's become the talking point, because it almost feels like there's not really much else to criticise Arsenal for at the moment. It's like, what is there left to criticise about Arsenal? They're top of the league. Their signings have integrated. And yes, maybe Gyökeres could have scored a few more goals. And that's why he, of course, still remains very much in kind of the media's eye and in a lot of fans' eyes about what can we say about things that might be a little concerned. But overall, Arsenal have gelled their new players. Zubimendi looks great. Eza's really hitting the ground running as well, I think, and is having, decent performances. Mosquera's been the surprise package, I think, in the entire Premier League in terms of, cheaper signings that have been made. Kepa's played one game, which I think we expected, but kept a clean sheet, of course, in that. And Madueke, annoying that he's injured, but covered Saka, I thought, brilliantly during his time that Saka was out, and really did kind of make the gap between feeling like Saka was missing and actually being missing to be very small. So it does feel like everyone's just like, the only thing we've got left is let's moan about how Arsenal are actually winning games, because that feels the only target left.
100%. And I think if we project forward and let's say, for argument's sake, that we have won the title come May, touch wood, I'm sure that there will be people, should we continue on this kind of like slightly unremarkable but still winning ways, that we weren't exciting to watch, too many set pieces. There's every time this happens, people we and to be fair, we do it as well. We move the goalposts. So I'm sure, at the beginning of the season, we said, right, there are certain fixtures that we just need to improve the points on. Everton, Fulham, that kind of thing. We've done that with West Ham, and all anyone could talk about was the atmosphere and the fact that maybe Gyökeres didn't score, or maybe we didn't play that well. But I've said it so many times, it was a relegation fodder on a, were we a Sunday? Were we a Sunday 2 p.m. on that one? I can't even remember. Or is
probably. Probably was a horrendous time to play. Yeah.
So, not every game needs to be spectacularly dramatic. And I don't care if we play boring football as long as it's efficient. I really, really don't, because that is how leagues are won at the moment. Don't think Liverpool were that convincing last year. They just ground out a win each time.
Yeah.
And I think we as fans need to be prepared for that. And that is not a symbol of the failing of our new signings, if that makes sense. The personnel that we've brought in will be doing things that enable us to win. They don't need to be just doing things that enable us to win beautifully. And so if we get a 1-0 on Saturday even, if we get 2-0, etc., whatever, that's absolutely fine by me. I don't really care what the media say. I say, having made load of TikToks this week about the media. Yeah, I don't really care.
That's it. Yeah,
clearly I do. But you move the goalposts every single time, and it's been well, Gyökeres hasn't scored, and then it was, well, Gyökeres hasn't scored in an important game, and then Gyökeres hasn't scored against a big side, and then he's not scored this type of goal. You're right. I just think we're looking for things to have a moan about, because it's also quite an uncomfortable thing to sit with and go, this feels a bit too perfect. This feels a bit, I feel a bit too happy. I must have something go wrong, because that's how we protect ourselves from the disappointment. So we are all doing that, but it's still early days. It's 7 games in. Anything can happen, but I'll have a lovely 1-0 win on Saturday, and I'll be happy with it.
100%. What is that phrase? Expect disappointment and you'll never be disappointed. That does feel like the Arsenal way of life as a fan sometimes, for sure.
That's so bleak.
Yeah, it's so bleak, but it's just so true about like where we are as fans, because we have faced disappointment so many times, and it feels such a privileged thing to say, being an Arsenal fan, sitting on. My missus, obviously, as you know, is a Charlton fan. The other side of the family, West Ham fans. My family, I've got Gillingham links and stuff, and I'd sit there and go, "Oh, did you finish second in the Premier League, you poor boy? Oh, what a shame." And I'm just like, yeah, you don't get it. It's different. And I'm like, but is it? And I'm like, well, not really, but it is. Like, it's just this lack of.
It is different, but yeah,
it is different. But I get.
Like, I do sound overly privileged here, but we're all here for the same thing, and we don't get it. I'm going to complain about it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. When I go to the restaurant expecting to get a chocolate cake from Nando's, I don't have any. I'm disappointed, regardless of the fact that I've had a great main course anyway. So, you know, it is the entitlement that comes along with being an Arsenal fan, or a fan of any club, of course, at that top end of the table. Who has been your most, I'm not going to say standout, because I think it's maybe an easy question, but who's been your favourite new signing that Arsenal have made this season?
Who has been my favourite? I mean, I would argue probably Mosquera, in terms of the gap between expectation and what I've actually seen. Yeah. I think the way that he conducted himself at Anfield. Anfield,
yeah.
You know, you can't ask more of a player, and you can't have thrown him into a worse start at the club in terms of, you know, environment. So I think in terms of kind of, I just didn't expect that. Zubimendi, I think, has delivered over and above what was expected of him, but expectations were quite high. You know, he's coming in as a very, very well-respected technical player who lots of clubs were after, and I think he has delivered somewhat, you know, beyond what I expected. But I think Mosquera, for me, it was just like a really nice surprise package that arrived with very little fanfare, and has proven himself to be not only, you know, more than good enough to play, but like essential to our squad depth now. You know, you take him out of the equation, you're going, right, what happens when Saliba's injured? As you said, Hincapié can play in the sort of Gabriel role, but without Mosquera, you're going, right, we are but a couple of injuries away from a little bit of a scary centre-back pairing. But with him in there, I'm like, he's very, very reliable, and that's a luxury to have.
Yeah, he is. And I think that it's funny, because a lot was kind of made of some of the lapses in defensive ability of his style when he was at Valencia, and some vulnerabilities in his game. But if you only watch these 8 appearances at Arsenal, you would never assume that there was any conversation of that ilk. You know, I know that he had kind of that moment, you know, as pointed out at Newcastle, where he gave the corner away kind of lapse lead that then led to the header. I mean, if Baltimore doesn't score there, I don't think anyone even remembers.
We never talk about it again. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just one of those, he just kind of missed the ball. But yeah, unfortunately, it did lead to a goal, which means it gets focused in on more than it probably should do. But overall, like, I've been so impressed with his confidence. Like, when Saliba's there, and I remember when Saliba first broke onto the scene, it was like he was doing things a centre-back just didn't do, like the way in which he would turn away from players and so calmly be on the ball in tight situations and come out of them just with not only possession, but having just kind of left the attacking player on the floor. And Mosquera, while I don't think is of that level just quite yet, has certainly given me the calmness that Saliba gives me when he's on the field. And for a 21-year-old centre-half, that's incredibly rare. And it's nuts that Arsenal managed to get 2 of those players come through at such a young, early age in their 20s to do such things. So, yeah, fair play to Andrea Berta, I guess I have to say, on getting that deal done. Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up as always. Before we go, give me your score prediction, which I mean, surely it has to be 1-0 to the Arsenal after what we just talked about. But
I see a 1-0. As I said, I think Fulham are difficult to beat at home. There is always like a tiny little bit of rustiness that comes with coming back after the international break, a little bit of fatigue that says to me we might go through a difficult sort of 20-30 minutes where if it was at the Emirates, you'd feel that turn in the stadium when everyone starts to get frustrated. But I have every faith that Arsenal can kind of play through that. So I'm going with a 1-0.
Lovely stuff. Yeah, I think I'll join you in a low score and say 2-0 as well, I think, to Arsenal. I mean, we've considered 1 goal from open play all season. So back in a clean sheet these days, which would be Raya's 5th, I think, in 8 games, quite incredibly so. In the Premier League, very impressive. So fingers crossed they get the result. Laura, tell people they can find you and what you're going to be up to if you want to share it, because maybe you're keeping things close to your chest these days with the content, but it is very, very entertaining what you do.
Do you know what, Tom? It just depends on what everyone else has to say and what nonsense I see out there. But you can find me on X. I'm Laura Kirk-12, and other platforms. I think I'm Laura Kirk-Francis. So it'll be the usual stuff. And probably the next one will be the Atletico game. So much like yourself, Tom, I also do a post-match vlog that's less exclusive.
It's way better. Even though I get the perks of access to certain things, I'd have to say Laura is fantastic. So make sure you check it out. And if you like seeing a little bit of extra focus on Calafiori, it's obviously really good for that reason too. But yes, please do go check out Laura's stuff and all of her content, because it is excellent. It is really, really fun and entertaining. I think it's a nice break, I think, sometimes from the serious. People sometimes ask me, why are you so objective, Tom? Why do you have to keep it so sensible? It's because people like Laura exist. I don't want them taking the mick out of me. That's why I have to keep it so chill all the time. But thank you for listening. Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for listening, people. Really appreciate you tuning in, as always. Sorry that we couldn't do the usual live show, but I hope you appreciate the effort that goes into, of course, putting on a show regardless. And you can, of course, check out all of the words from Mikel Arteta's press conference on the football.london website and all the reaction to that in the Mirror newspaper the next morning as well. I'll see you on Saturday morning, bright and early, of course, on the day of the game, to break down that press conference and look ahead in more detail to the game against Fulham. Have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.